Thanks for joining Just Us Chatting. My name is Michael, and this is Tamara.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about these stupid MAGA kids that were harassing this Native American guy.
Yeah. That was hard to watch.
So frustrating.
Yeah, it was really... that was rough to watch. I don't know if you guys have seen it. We linked to the video below, and if you're watching now, you can check that out. We linked to an NPR article, but it's also on YouTube. It's blown up. It's everywhere.
What was the high school? It was they were all from this Catholic high school.
They were from some Catholic high school in Kentucky, and I'm not looking for mob action against a school or anything like this, but man, it was disturbing to watch, to see these kids.
Yeah, this one guy in particular was just all up in this Native American guy's face while he was doing a drumming ceremony of some kind, and just looking at, oh yeah, you got it up now?
Yeah, take a look at that.
Just his face, so smug and I don't know, full of such kind of hatred, but with that smile.
Yeah, you can see the the smugness and the reveling in a certain kind of power it's pretty gross. Yeah. And I've heard there's a lot of people that have, I'll come back to video, there's a lot of people who have come out and said, a lot of people have come out and been really upset by this, but I've also heard people, saying these are just kids.
Yeah.
They're stupid and stuff like that. It's like, well, yeah.
They're young, but it's kind of like, okay, when I was that age, my parents taught me to respect people.
Yeah.
No matter the race, creed, religion.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, did this guy's parents not teach him that? Or did they even teach him, that white people are superior or something? What?
I think this is basically down to youthful hubris and
mob
mentality.
Yeah.
And also the general kind of degradation of political discourse, where it's just sides. It's tribalism.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So this was a group of Catholic students who were in D.C. for the March for Life rally, or the pro-life rally.
And alongside that, there was another rally going on, right?
So this was the first ever. I think they said. Let me see if I can find it here. I'll show you what I'm looking at so that I'm not just being rude.
Indigenous
the
Peoples
first ever
March.
Indigenous Peoples March.
It was the first ever?
Yeah, that's what I think I saw that somewhere. So maybe I'm wrong, but it was, in any case, it was on the same day, and so they were there, and it's kind of crazy because from what I've heard, there's all these MAGA kids, saying build that wall, and so it went from, there's all these people there for, anti-abortion protests, and then there's these other people here for Native American peoples. Yeah. And these two groups clash over something that neither of them are there marching about.
Right.
So it's bizarre. It's just kind of like there's this single issue kind of division. It's build that wall, and all these people are going build the wall, and then there's this this other. Well, he decided that he was going to sing. I don't know if he decided it or what was planned or whatever was going on with it, but he's singing a kind of an anthem of the American Indian movement. Which there's some violent history around a lot of movements in the 60s, but there is some violence in the American Indian movement too, so I don't want anyone on the right to think I'm ignorant of that, but it doesn't excuse this behavior, honestly.
Yeah.
The fact that some people were violent in the 60s doesn't mean that they're the same organizations and the same people now. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if he was active in the 60s, he's considerably older and wiser at this point, so to kind of
and he was a Vietnam War veteran.
He's a Vietnam War veteran. This man, and that was the other thing. To look at this kid's smug face, standing there staring down a person who, a person who in this country is a legitimate cultural descendant of people who are the victims of genocide.
Right.
Like literally victims of genocide on this continent.
Right.
And that man stood up and took a rifle and he went into the jungles of Vietnam to fight communism on behalf of the government that was like almost completely obliterated his people. And to see this smug little punk staring him down like that is infuriating. Yeah. It's infuriating. No. It's just disgusting.
It's possible that he didn't join the war of his own volition. I mean, back then, lots of people were drafted, and lots of people went to fight because they were drafted, and they didn't want to be there.
Lots of people went to Canada because they were drafted too.
I know.
And so the fact that he was drafted doesn't mean that he wasn't willing to go.
Right. I know. I'm just saying that it's possible that it wasn't his first choice.
No, I'm sure.
But regardless, he was there and he did it. And what did this stupid little 16-year-old? What has he done?
Right.
He's been on this planet for like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And he's gonna act like he knows better, and that he's somehow superior to this guy, right. And he's gonna intimidate him and stand 2 feet from his face.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. This guy, honestly, I'm surprised he was able to show such restraint.
Yep.
Because and I have a problem with people getting in my personal space, but
the other thing is he's an activist, and so he's probably at least partially used to the confrontational nature of activism, for one.
Yeah.
For two, he's Native American, right? So he probably has an experience of racism, of
at least
prejudice, you know what I mean, and racism and people in his face with that. So whereas it may seem exceptionally shocking to us to see it, it's probably not exceptionally shocking to him. He's probably not so thin-skinned about it. But I mean so you're right. The fact that he's been on this planet for like basically 2 seconds and he's staring down this, this war veteran who's been here for 70, 80 years, it's just unbelievable, the hubris and arrogance.
Yeah.
And to, I don't, well, let's say this too. Like, I don't think it just boils down to racism, right? I think because there may be racism in it, but from what I've read and what I've heard, this sparked over kind of disagreements over whether or not to build a wall, right? And so you can conflate wanting to build a wall with racism, but it's an intellectually dishonest kind of sleight of hand.
Yeah.
It's a shortcut to calling anyone who disagrees with you evil, but it's not the same as saying that. It's not the same as trying to make a case that it's unreasonable to have border security, or that it's unreasonable, for
we have walls around our belongings and around us as we sleep at night. Yeah. Like, there's a reason that we have walls.
Boundaries are not necessarily problematic.
I'm not necessarily for the wall, but I'm also not necessarily against it. I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I just know that it's not as simple of a situation as people who want it are racist and people who don't are compassionate. Like, it's not as easy as that.
No.
You can't just...
No, it's never that. It's never that simple. But I do think, if anything, this really speaks to the idea that, like, I saw a ballot initiative in the last, election, in the recent midterm elections.
Yeah.
There's a ballot initiative asking whether or not we wanted to decrease the age for representatives.
Oh, I remember that.
And I was like, no.
Isn't it already like 25 or something?
Yeah, it's like, should we decrease that down to 21? It's like, no.
No.
They're
don't barely want these, not kids anymore.
These and these arrogant little pricks, right? That have no idea. Like, I don't care if you've gone to college. I don't care if you've got some sort of expertise in political science or
You've barely
law.
lived. You haven't experienced.
You don't know
this.
anything.
Yeah.
If you're 21 years old, and I'm not saying that to you. I'm saying that to everyone because me, I didn't know anything when I was 21. I don't know anyone who knew anything when they were 21.
Yeah.
21-year-olds are morons.
And they think that we thought we knew everything at 21. We thought we were so smart and so intelligent and so much smarter than, older people. Mm-hmm. And it's like,
Well, okay, I shouldn't say 21-year-olds are morons. It's not true. There's a lot of intelligence. Obviously, there's high intelligence, but there's a very big difference between having high intelligence and knowing how to appropriately utilize it.
Right.
Right? It's like there's really smart kids running around, right? And I'm calling them kids, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, kids.
Yeah.
Kids.
Yeah.
I don't care. They're kids.
Yeah.
Running around with really, sharp
intellect.
minds.
Yeah.
But without
not a lot of experience.
Without
at
any
that
wisdom
point.
about how to use it.
Yeah.
So, it's like kids running around with guns.
Yeah.
It's dangerous, and I don't think there's any reason to think that we should be lowering the voting age and lowering it's almost like if the left had their way, they'd have toddlers voting, because it's like, well, then mommy can just go ahead and fill it out for you. It's so it's such a bad idea.
Yeah. It's
a really bad idea. I understand the impulse to fresh new ideas and it's great but honestly it's to take advantage of people who aren't wise enough to know better than to give away their rights. That's what really boils down to. And it's like this whole oh yeah, we need the youth vote. You get the young people out there to vote. It's like, yeah, because they're just swayed by platitudes.
Yeah.
We think, the radical notion that women are human, or it's like the radical notion that women are people. Oh, yeah, there's people out there that don't believe that women are people. Oh, yeah, that's stupid. We should vote for you. Anyone who's fighting against people who don't think women are people, obviously, let's go ahead and just jump on that bandwagon. It's like the kids are susceptible to that kind of sloganeering, and so you get these. Well, you look at this guy, and he's just, standing there sneering at a man whose bravery and commitment is, basically unquestionable.
Yeah.
And to see this kid sneering with his, absolutely unearned sense of righteousness, and it's just...
I hope that.
I could. The problem, and people say, oh well, white privilege, and people bring race into this. I'm sure, right? And maybe there's some race in there, but it's not just race. I can see in his eyes, right? I can see the youth.
Yeah.
I can see the inexperience. Yeah. I can see the
ignorance.
The ignorance of youth. Yeah. That kind of self-assured smugness of youth. And if you're over the age of 30, right, and you can't recognize that, you're lying to yourself, or you're still in it. That's just the part of that is just the fact that that's a teenage boy.
Yeah.
Right? And he's surrounded by a bunch of people who are kind of he's reveling in the conflict.
Yeah. I really hope that he gets a good talking to from his parents. I hope people let him know how ridiculously stupid he's being, but the problem is he's got all these other young people, his peers, which of course at that age you're trying to impress your peers, at least a lot of people are.
The mob mentality is
right.
really a huge
and
problem.
So unfortunately he's going to keep having probably lots of people his own age kind of applauding him for his stupid actions and not telling him that it's stupid. But I hope his parents, adults will shed some light on his ill-informed brain and, you know what I mean? Just let him know how stupid he's being.
They were this image that we were just looking at isn't like if you actually watch the video, I'm not gonna play the whole thing, but if you or any of it actually, but if you actually watch it, there's these kids are doing the tomahawk chop while this guy's singing the anthem of his of the American Indian movement, right?
Yeah, and they're all
and they're
like hooting and hollering and
like doing this like we're at a Braves game, right? Which just to add a little salt on that injury, right? Like, oh yeah, we're just gonna like laugh at you about the fact that we use your people as a mascot for our sports teams in the middle of this mob of entitled little brats. It's oh, it was disgusting. It was so disgusting to watch. And I'm usually not a person who is quick to jump to denigration of people on the right. I'm so skeptical of the mainstream media sources at this point in time that when I see stuff, I almost always go, well, let's see if there's more context here, and I don't jump straight to it. But this was so visceral when I watched these videos, and I've watched it from I've seen it from a couple different sources, and I watched this video. It was so visceral. I shared it on Facebook, and I was like, what's up with your brown shirts here, MAGA?
I don't know what that means, but
oh, the brown shirts were like the Hitler Youth.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That were all Heil Hitler shit.
Yeah.
Oh man. So maybe we should move on to something a little less
so
infuriating.
that's our little rant on these MAGA brats and I just wanted to. I think we just wanted to put our 2 cents on that and denounce this kind of behavior.
Yeah.
It's absolutely appalling and
reprehensible.
It's completely reprehensible, and we wish Mr. Nathan Phillips the very best in getting his voice heard.
Yeah.
For his people and the people of this whole nation. So we appreciate what he's done for our country. We appreciate his service in Vietnam, even though he may not have wanted to go there. I don't know if he was drafted or not. Yeah. But I appreciate it nonetheless.
Yeah.
And I appreciate his activism, even if I don't agree with his views, and I don't know if I agree with his views.
Yeah.
So but I appreciate that he's politically active, and I think that this sneering condescension of brats is absolutely disgusting.
Yeah.
So just wanted to put our 2 cents in on this because it's a big story right now, and we want to let it be known what we feel about this. So but anyway, the other thing that's been on my mind a lot recently, has ever since the Gillette ad came out was the Red Pill movie and Karen Strawn. So I've decided I'm going to start calling Karen Strawn my gender studies professor. She's my new gender studies professor. I don't know if you.
She is incredibly intelligent.
She's super smart.
Very well read and and she's got a unique perspective, I think.
She does. She has. She is very well researched. She and she contextualizes things very well. When people say to her, "Well, don't you want to thank the suffragettes for
the right to vote?"
The right to
Your
vote.
right to vote.
So when people want to kind of cram that down her throat, at least the suffragettes gave you the right to vote. She says, no, they didn't. And then she backs it up with facts. She's like, no, the franchise was expanding anyway. Other people were fighting for the right women to vote. It's just that suffragettes get the credit for being terrorists because they were like throwing bombs and being violent and stuff. So
making a scene.
Yeah, they're being pretty intense.
That usually gets some pretty good coverage.
Yeah, So, but yeah, I mean, I'm not nearly as well read on the history as she is. She's always, like every time I watch any of her videos, I'm seeing new information to add additional context.
Yeah.
And you know, I've watched enough of her videos that I'm not shocked anymore. Mm-hmm. When somebody asks her something that I would like, well, she'll probably agree with that, and then she doesn't. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I've been shocked before too, definitely.
It's like, of course, everyone agrees. Oh, never mind. Maybe. Oh, wow. Yeah. I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. You know, and she's, as an avid contrarian, mm-hmm. I love, kind of looking at countervailing views.
Yeah.
And as far as I can see from where I'm sitting, maybe you tell me what you think. You guys tell me what you think too. I don't know. From where I'm sitting, feminism is the prevailing cultural narrative.
I think so.
Basically, it's in all our media. It's in you know, the movies. It's in TV
it's
shows.
In the movies, like mad. Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
So I think it's the predominant narrative.
Yeah, I think so.
And so it's just very interesting to hear someone who is like she self-described
as
open
anti-feminist.
Openly self-described herself as anti-feminist. And she's not. I mean, she's first of all, so mm-hmm. you can't you. It's real hard to. I mean, I always see the conflation of like, if you're against feminism, you're against women, like those two things.
I was just going to say, she's not anti-women, she's just anti-feminist, right. You know?
Yeah.
And she'd like to shed light on all the ways that men and boys are being dragged through the mud and, you know, oppressed really, or, you know, denigrated, mm-hmm. you know, and, so she's not anti-women, but
I think, like, kind of between her and Jordan Peterson, it's mm-hmm. like gender studies 101 for me. Like, it's kind of weird. Obviously, not 101, but like, because one of the things that Karen Strong talks about the most is that, or that I constantly see a recurring theme, mm-hmm. is the kind of the rights side of the argument, mm-hmm. but not the responsibilities side of the argument. Right. So feminism wanted the right to vote, but not the responsibility to go to war.
Yeah. But right? I don't think a lot of people know that that was the history, that, right. you know, only wealthy landowners were allowed to vote at a certain point, and then they were going to start allowing the everyman to vote, but only because he was going to be drafted and forced to go to war.
Right.
And so they were like, well, if men are going to be forced to go to war, then they should be allowed to vote as well.
Right, and what the nation decides, right?
And I don't think a lot of people know that. I certainly didn't know that years ago.
Right.
You know?
It's there's a lot of cultural sound bites, you know, like women didn't even have the right to vote. Well,
it's like neither did
some women did.
Lower class men.
Some women did.
Yeah, did the upper class women?
Yeah, if they owned land, mm-hmm. right? That's the other one. Women couldn't even own property. Yes, they could.
Yeah.
Women couldn't even run businesses. Yes, they could.
Yeah.
I didn't know this.
Yeah.
I didn't know this. Why didn't I know this? Like,
maybe it wasn't.
How come I didn't know this?
Maybe it wasn't like very common.
It totally wasn't very common, mm-hmm. But
it wasn't like a zero-sum thing. Like, women just can't work. Women can't own property. Women can't.
I was watching one of her things last night, and mm-hmm. she talks about how she has a a kind of registrar of businesses from the 1400s.
Yeah.
Right? From the 1400s in England.
I wonder if it's like a physical copy,
I don't know,
like some ancient document. Well, not ancient, but you know,
right? You know, as there's registers of all the tradespeople in this, you know, county or town or whatever, mm-hmm. and there
were a few master blacksmiths that were women.
Yeah, master blacksmiths that were women, and so, you know, through the whole apprentice and journeyman thing, mm-hmm. you know. And the idea that some women actually didn't have to go through the apprentice and journeyman thing, mm-hmm. because if you married a master blacksmith,
you could learn
and
from him,
and he trained you to do the job, if he died, you just inherited his mastery.
Right.
So you didn't have to go through the whole journeyman process or anything like this.
Well, through him, under him, you did.
No,
well,
journeyman was like, so we think of journeyman now as like, it's like apprentice and then journeyman and then, you know, you can become, right? And it's just kind of like, oh yeah, you go in and for a while you're an apprentice and then a little later you're a journeyman. Journeyman actually used to be, and I also learned this from listening to her, journeyman actually used to be that you would have to journey around. Like you'd have to, like, you're an apprentice and okay, you're good enough to go ply your trade, get out. And they'd kick you out and you'd have to like journey around and try and find people who wanted your services.
Okay.
Right? And you'd find some little town or some village that was like, oh yeah, we could use a blacksmith.
And then you could stay and,
then
set
you
up
could
shop.
stay and set up shop, and or you know, you'd go from place to place, you know, mending horseshoes and you know, mending tools and stuff like this, wherever you were needed until some you know, till you found some place where you really could settle in, right? And so it was just kind of like, you were literally a journeyman. You had to journey around for, you know, ply your trade. And then and then eventually you could set up shops someplace as a master. But now, you know, it's just titles. It's just kind of like advancement things. But back in those days, being a journeyman was dangerous as hell because you're just walking around on the road by yourself. You know, and so like that's something that some women were able to inherit without having to go through any of that. So, but regardless, they did inherit property. They had their own property. If they were single or widowed, they had full legal control of all their stuff. And if they weren't single or married, they still had control of their stuff, but the man had responsibility. Right? So
if they weren't single or married?
No, if they weren't single or widowed, I should say, but if they were married, women had control of their own property, but men were responsible for their taxes.
Oh, really? The taxes on the woman's property?
Yes. There's so much that like is left out of the narrative that we receive and sound bites about, you know, how women were oppressed throughout history. You know, there's so much context that's left out. You know, there was the patriarchy for however it existed was a system of counterbalancing rights and privileges. And you know, the idea that it was all just one-sided oppression is completely false. It's absolutely entirely false.
Well, it's like everyone was oppressed in different ways, you know?
Yes.
Men were responsible for the families, and, you know, for if, like, the woman incurred any kind of debt, he was responsible for paying off her debt.
Yep.
And what if she committed, like, a crime or something? Was he somehow... I mean, she would still go to jail, right?
If there were... No.
No?
No. No, we didn't put women in jail.
Well, never?
No.
Really?
Not generally speaking. I mean,
so
like,
if the woman committed a crime, the husband was responsible?
In like high political crimes and stuff like this, like where you see okay, for example, right? Mary Queen of Scots. She was under arrest.
Yeah.
Right? She was imprisoned.
Yeah.
In a castle.
Right. And
with servants.
She was eventually beheaded, but I mean, what was her crime?
Well, this is what I'm saying. Like, the way that... So, where was the... Oh, God, I wish I don't want to speak too, you know, strongly on this, but... And this is why, you know... I've got to listen to more of what she said, but she mentioned something about this, that there was a movement in the early, I think, 1900s to it's not that we didn't, right? It's not that we didn't put women in prison, but there was actually a movement in the early 1900s apparently to kind of just abolish the idea of putting women in prisons because it was almost impossible to get a jury to convict a woman of anything because of the fact that she was just seen as that
innocent or a pawn or
just that prison was too harsh of a punishment for any woman. You just don't do that to a woman.
So they didn't have women's prisons back then.
Well, I mean, even if they did, it was the idea that the state would kidnap. Like this is the other thing. We didn't always think of the state as like this, benevolent thing that just like just helps everyone get along and just helps like the thought of government thugs coming and kidnapping a woman and moving her somewhere against her will was just abhorrent. It was absolutely abhorrent. The idea that like some government authority was going to come around and grab a woman and drag her off to somewhere that she didn't want to be and make her stay there. That was just like too much to bear.
That's crazy. So then you'd think a lot of like criminal masterminds would make women do their dirty work because if they knew it was unlikely for the woman to get in trouble for it, then why not see if they can pay her to do something that they don't want to do.
Well, and that's the thing is that along with kind of unrealistic expectations on men for their level of power and control and like their ability to control their wives, that made them legally responsible for all sorts of nonsense. There was an unrealistic view of women as kind of the innocent moral arbiters of society and culture. Like they're and that's part of the reason. Like something else I learned just recently. Politics, right? The tied to the idea that government thugs coming and touching a woman was abhorrent. Politics was considered dirty. Politics was considered to be something that kind of sinful people engaged in. Women. That was another reason that women didn't want the vote.
Some women
didn't want the vote. At one point in time, I think they did a poll that 70% of women polled were against the idea of women getting the vote.
Yeah, because they didn't want to be involved.
Yeah, because the world saw women as as more virtuous than that. More virtuous than that, right? That they were that women would be sullied and tarnished, right? By the mudslinging and lying and kind of manipulations of politics. It was power mongering. That women were paragons of moral virtue that were above and beyond that, and we still have that. Like we've got like echoes of that.
Yeah.
Right, where we're just supposed to believe women, and we're supposed to do the idea that like women are compassionate. It's like
I mean, just because we have like an ingrained desire to be nurturing. I mean, okay, a mother bear, if she feels her cubs are, in danger at all, she will be harsh, and destructive.
To her cubs.
Right, exactly. And I mean, women, we have an innate kind of nurturing within us. I think that obviously towards our children, a little bit towards our, greater family and our husbands. But that does not mean that we're just compassionate across the board and all the time, and that we're like these moral, upright, citizens, and that we never get angry, that we never lie, that we never, do bad things or manipulate. We're certainly far from perfect.
Well, we're all humans, right?
Yeah.
That's like what was supposed to be coming out of this whole gender equality movement was the idea that we're all human.
but one thing that gets pointed out over and over again is that it's always about rights without countervailing responsibilities. And the interesting thing is that it seems like all the responsibilities are supposed to be collectivized, but all the rights are supposed to be individual, right? And so it's like, well, I get the individual right to okay, so you know, go to like sexual politics and abortion and all this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, so we've got the birth control pill, and women are autonomous human beings, and they should be able to have sex and make their own choices. Obviously, I think that's pretty obvious at this point in time. However, like, the countervailing responsibilities that go along with that are like still, you know, it's like if you choose, I'm getting into deep water here. If you choose to have sex and you're a woman, right? You can choose to take the morning after pill.
Right.
You can choose to have an abortion a little later.
Or you can choose to have.
You can choose to have the child. You can choose to have the child and put it up for adoption.
Right. Lots of choices.
Lots of
options.
Right.
Yeah.
If
Man doesn't have so many options.
No, certainly not. And not only that, but like now it's like, okay, well, can we get the government to subsidize the morning after pill? Can we get the government to subsidize our abortions? Can we get the government to subsidize, you know, our choices as single mother, like to be single mothers? Can we get, you know, special advantages because we decided to be mothers on our own, right? Like so all the way along the line, it's like there's this kind of trend towards, yes, we want all the rights, but we also still want to be protected from the responsibilities.
Right.
The kind of, you know, the kind of intermingling responsibilities.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's kind of interesting to see that unfold. Like when she points this out, it's like you can see this unfolding over time. One of the things you said yesterday that was really interesting was that in first wave feminism, they wanted more rights without the responsibilities.
Right.
In second wave feminism, they wanted
what was it? Less responsibility.
Right. They wanted fewer responsibilities.
Even fewer responsibilities and more rights.
Right. And in third wave feminism, they want men to have more responsibilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just this. It's you know. I've never really thought about it that way before, and it was kind of like, oh, it's like, it's kind of hard to. It can be hard to listen to.
Yeah.
But it's like so
frustrating.
I don't know if it's frustrating.
Sad.
It's sad. It seems so clear and obvious suddenly. Like when she says certain things, you just kind of like, it almost hurts the way that your mind kind of goes, oh yeah, obviously. You know, it's like I've been torturing my mind into thinking a certain way because like that's the way that I'm supposed to think for so long. And when I hear someone articulate the way she does so clearly, just kind of like that tension of my mind going like, it has to be like this, just kind of like suddenly popping open. Like somebody just kind of like popped the button and it popped open. You know, it's like, oh, and the release of mental tension is so palpable. And it happens like every, you know, various, you know, just kind of like peppered in throughout, just kind of listening to her. It's almost like guru-like in the way that they like drop a little thing and your mind goes, you know, like,
mind blown.
You know?
Yeah. And I do think that, men are having less rights and more responsibilities. Like, over the years, we women have had more and more options. Like, we're able to do so many different things, and we're still valuable, and we have more rights and less responsibilities. Like, you know, we can choose to work, we can choose to have kids, we can choose to, you know, not have kids. We can do all these different things. We can go to college, we could delay having kids. But like, women still want a man that makes more money than them. Men are still kind of like, expected to bring in, you know, a lot of money, and their roles haven't changed much at all. You know what I mean? Like, women, our roles have changed. Like, we can do so many different things, and we're not expected to do the household things that we used to have to do. We're not expected to just be mothers. But men, it's like, your role really hasn't changed much. You know what I mean? In society's eyes. Warren Farrell talks a little bit about it.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's sad, you know? And like, when it comes to like divorce court, you know, men are expected to pay for kids that maybe they're not even allowed to see, or not allowed to see very often.
Or aren't theirs.
Or aren't theirs, right? That's a whole nother thing. But I mean, we have DNA, like, you know, we have ways of finding out whether a man's kids are his own these days, but it's just not always done.
Still.
What do you mean?
Even if man has
DNA
that's
evidence.
True.
That's true. That has happened. I don't know if that's a standard. Like, if that's...
I don't know if that's... I don't know. It probably varies from state to state, but that was something that was in the Red Pill movie.
Because that seems a little incredulous to me.
It's crazy, right? But it does happen. There's a guy who's, at least at the time of the filming, when Cassie J was filming the Red Pill movie, there was a man, I think in Michigan, who was facing jail for refusing to pay $30,000 in back child support for a child that he
found out, like,
literally was not his.
Right.
And the woman, I mean, I think there was DNA evidence that it wasn't his, and the woman just kind of said that she didn't know who the father was, and she needed a name for the birth certificate, so she just picked him. Yeah.
And that's ridiculous. Like, I can't imagine any judge requiring him to pay for a child that's not his just because his name's on the birth certificate. But if he has DNA evidence that the child is not his, how could they try to force him to pay?
Because the laws are primarily to protect children, secondarily to protect women because women protect children, and then, you know, men are disposable. So it doesn't really matter whether or not this is the basic kind of progression of the law. It's like, it doesn't really matter whether or not it's his child. He's the one who's responsible for that child because he's the one who had been responsible for that child in the past, you know, or like he accepted responsibility for that child at some point, and so now that's just it. For the stability of the child, he is going to be held accountable by the law to continue.
I hope he's fighting this, and I hope that
that was why he stopped paying it.
Right. I hope someone takes this on, and like some lawyer.
I'd have to check it out. Like, the movie came out it's
been a number of years now.
Several years.
2016 maybe.
Maybe 2016 it came out.
Yeah. 2015.
And I think she was probably filming in 2014, 2015, something like this. Maybe. Yeah. Maybe even earlier. Yeah. But
I hope that he was able to fight that, and it's so not right. It's like, are you kidding me?
And then there was the really interesting montage about Boko Haram that was also in the movie.
Yeah. Where, like, I mean, well,
everyone remembers. Probably most people remember the 200 Bring Back Our Girls campaign. There was hashtag Bring Back Our Girls, and Michelle Obama.
Was it Nigeria? I think it was Nigeria, and Boko Haram was the rebel group that had been kidnapping young children, and earlier on they had been kidnapping young boys and killing, or just setting their dorms on fire, burning them alive. And really, there was not a media storm about it over here. So, and they had left the one girls' building alone. They had burned all the boys alive. And nothing, crickets over here. Like, they really wanted attention. And so they, had originally left the girls alone, but then they realized to get any kind of attention, they were going to have to mess with the girls. So they kidnapped like 200 Nigerian girls and brought them into the jungle or whatever, and was like, they were like giving them off into slavery.
Selling them into slavery and marriage.
And then, of course, there was a media backlash over here, like insane.
As soon as it was, they were killing people at unbelievable rates. There were like, they'd killed something like 2,300 people in 6 months. It was pretty intense. But most of the people they killed were men.
Men and boys,
because that's acceptable. Yeah. I mean, even in so in their they're not. It's not. And the other thing is we spun it over here that these evil extremists who I would say okay they're evil extremists. It's a fair characterization.
Yeah.
Right. But these evil extremists are trying to keep girls from getting an education. That's how we spun that.
Oh yeah.
Right. It's like they're
but really they were trying to keep all the children from getting a Western education.
Right. Western secular education.
Yeah.
They're religious extremists.
Right.
They don't want people getting Western secular ideals through foreign aid supported education.
Yeah. And
so they were going to these schools and burning the schools down, stuff like this.
Yeah.
They were literally killing the boys. They went to one school. They went in and got all the children. They told the girls, go home, renounce your sins, get married, be wives, be good, be good Muslim girls, and sent them home. And then they locked the doors and burned all the boys alive inside the building.
God.
And nobody cared about that. Nobody cared about that tragedy, that travesty, that horrific murder.
Yeah.
No one cared about that one.
Yeah.
The girls being kidnapped and sold or something. That caused an international media storm.
Yeah.
It was insane. Like everyone knew about it. It was.
Yeah.
I mean, we're
all
still
sorts
talking
of
about it this long
celebrities.
later.
Michelle Obama. It's like bring our girls home. It was front page news for a little while for sure. And I don't remember what ended up happening, but I mean.
But yeah, it definitely got people's attention.
Yeah.
Right? So this is something that, again, like I didn't think about this before. I've always kind of worried, like, oh well, what if I'm, if I talk about this kind of stuff and it ends up being supportive of this kind of crazy backlash that's going to end up hurting women. What if I'm talking about this stuff and it's going to end up being, kind of used by like I don't want a political movement that's going to hurt women.
Yeah.
I don't want that. You know what I mean? Like, and so I've always kind of been worried about that. And then somebody, I don't remember who it was, somebody asked Karen about that in a video that I was watching too, and she said something that blew my mind again. It was like, that's not really possible.
Because there's enough people that have a desire to protect women.
We have a built-in biological, right? It's
urge.
Like it's actually evolutionarily biologically built into us at this point, because in sexually dimorphic hominids, right? Even back before human, Homo sapiens sapien.
Yeah.
Right? Before humans were walking around, we still had these kinds of gender roles where men were well, first of all, women are the limiting factor in reproduction. So if a disaster takes out a bunch of women, that'll end the whole tribe. If a disaster takes out a bunch of men, the tribe can keep going as long as there's a couple men left. Right. So, but if you run out of women, that's it.
Yeah, but that's not as important anymore because
it's not. But it has biologically affected us.
Sure.
Like we're hardwired to react to women being hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And it's part of the reason that it's so easy to just say, it's so easy to kind of overlook the fact that men had to be willing to die to get the vote, and women just had to ask for it. Right? They said, well, none of we don't want that whole like going and dying thing. Like, and then it was like, but we still want to vote.
Yeah.
All right, so as long as we're not going to do the whole going and dying and more thing, we're all good with the idea of voting. And everyone went, yeah. And it's like, okay, fine. Here you go. Like, just boom, there it is. Like, as soon as there was kind of like cultural agreement that voting didn't have to be tied to going to war,
yeah,
and that women could just have it without that responsibility, it was like, all right, fine, we all want it. Here you go, have it. Boom. Like, a couple of years.
Yeah.
It was. As soon as we kind of sorted out the details, it's like, we don't want to go die.
I wonder how that made the soldiers that were drafted feel. And I'm sure some of them were not thrilled about the fact that, they were being forced to go to war. No?
No.
What?
I don't think so. Men are... That's the other thing is that... I mean, I'm sure there are some, but like, in general... I bit my tongue. In general, I think that men feel like that's the heroic thing to do.
To go to war.
Yeah, to go... I mean, if the you know, if the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor and, you know, there's Nazis and taking over Europe and, you know, it's like, all right, let's go do the strong man thing and, you know, stand up for the oppressed.
Yeah.
It's kind of like our thing.
Yeah.
You know, like it's the warrior impulse. It's not, oh, let's beat and rape our women. Like that makes me a man. Like that's not the thing, right? Like the thing is, what makes you a man is protecting women and children.
Yeah.
Like, so sacrifice for women and children is definitively masculine. You know, so like the idea that we need to break down masculinity in order to protect women and children is kind of backwards and stupid.
Yeah.
And it's like, and so yeah, she laid this out. It's like we've got such a reflexive. She pointed out this. I don't know the specifics of the case, but there was a mass protest, I think, in Saudi Arabia, where men had been wearing. Police were aware that men had been wearing burqas to avoid getting beaten
by the police,
because even in Saudi Arabia, the police wouldn't beat women. So it just so happened that they were trying to break up this protest, this massive protest, and there was video of this where there's like, you know, eight or 10 people on screen getting their heads stomped in, basically just getting the crap kicked out of them. And one of them is in a burqa, and at one point.
Well, and they didn't know, at this point, they were starting to know that guys were wearing burqas. Right. So then they were starting to beat people in burqas.
So they knocked this person down. They were stomping this person who was in a burqa, and suddenly the burqa came up or open, and there's this blue bra.
Right.
And like there was one guy like swinging his foot and mid kick, like as soon as that was open, like another cop shoved him out of the way. They helped her up. They, you know, got her out of there immediately. As soon as they were like, oh yeah, this is actually a woman, got her out of there.
Yeah.
Right? And everyone went nuts anyway. They're like, oh my God, they were beating a woman. This has to stop. And like, you know, thousands of people in the streets. It was an eruption.
Because of that.
Because of that. Not because of the other 10 people that were getting their skulls caved in.
Right.
But because of the one woman who got beaten. Right? So, and this is in Saudi Arabia. Right, so we think of Saudi Arabia as like not a bastion of you know, women's rights.
Right. But they still have a certain protective.
They're still protected.
Yeah.
Right, like it's still the case.
There's still some chivalry there, a little bit.
It's still the case that women are supposed to be protected from male violence.
Yeah, and sometimes they go too far and they protect them so much that they just keep them from being free, and they have to have male guardians, and they can't, you know, get a job. But that's a whole other thing, and like that's a whole other topic, because we were finding out more about the rights and responsibilities of people over there, and that it's not all cut and dry. It's not all black and white, and you know, with the responsibilities or with the, you know, lack of rights that women have, there's also certain responsibilities that men have that, like, if you give the woman too many rights, then they're going to oppress the men even more. Like, that was a whole other thing that she was talking about.
Which is weird, like, to even think those words. Like, in the Middle East, the women will oppress the men more.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly didn't think
it's so weird. Like, I don't, like, it's not my culture. It's not my, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, but, like, it's I think that these, well, they're basically blue meme, right? So if you don't know that, if you're not aware of that, you can check out another video on Spiral Dynamics to kind of hear a little bit more of that. Blue or amber. But these class systems and these you know, very strict gender roles are, you know, they're not as sophisticated as as systems based on individual rights, but there's
a balance of powers. Mm-hmm. There's kind of a balance of rights and responsibilities that are shared.
Yeah.
Right. So, and if you just so the way that again, Karen Strawn, my new gender studies professor, was talking about this because Dave Rubin asked her, why don't feminists get, feminists should be over there, raising hell about, women's rights in the Middle East.
And I would have agreed with him.
I would have agreed with them too.
Or maybe I still do to a certain extent.
I don't know what to say about this because she has friends who are Muslim, mm-hmm. and she's talked to them about Sharia law and the things that, the Sharia law is basically like, religious customs, mm-hmm. And in some places they're held to be law, and in other places, like in Canada, they're, religiously held customs.
Right.
But she said that when a man and woman get married, the man has to sign for basically a chunk of money that is promised to this woman that's hers, mm-hmm. that she can't, and that she can call on that money whenever she wants to, mm-hmm. and he's not allowed to touch it. And if he dies or anything like this, then all of it goes to her. Or if he divorces her or cheats on her or whatever, then all of that money goes to her, and she gets to keep that.
Yeah.
And so that's just hers, and that. So this is like a kind of like a marriage gift or something, yeah. basically, and
it's almost like the opposite of a dowry,
right?
Because a dowry would go with the woman. It would be a gift from the wife's family to the husband,
right?
To help pay for her or whatever. But this is like the opposite. It's like the new husband is gifting the wife this money,
right?
So it's kind of opposite of the dowry.
Yeah, it's kind of like a backwards dowry idea.
But then, if she wants to work, she needs the husband's permission,
right? But that's because he's responsible for her expenses,
right?
So there's this kind of weird interplay there. Like the reason she needs his permission is because under Sharia, he's responsible for if she needs a car, mm-hmm. that's his responsibility to pay for it. If she needs
clothing, food, housing,
all of the kind of expenses that go along with having a profession or mm-hmm. a career, like
or just living expenses.
I mean,
he's got to pay for everything.
Yeah, he's got to pay for all of that. But if she gets a job additionally, right, then that's gas and transportation and additional food, childcare while she's gone. While he, if they're both working, then he's responsible for the cost of childcare and everything. So he's got to be significantly wealthier than her, right, to allow to be able to afford for her to work somewhere,
right? Which it seems insane to me, because it's so different,
it's
in
very
the Western
it's
world.
Very different because we don't expect that the man has to pay for the woman's car,
right?
Necessarily,
right? It's like if both of you are working, you
then
share
you
the income.
Your money.
Yeah, you pool.
But that's not the way it works because under Sharia, if she makes money, it's hers, and the man should be ashamed of himself for touching that.
Jeez.
Right. So it's like you like the idea that she's supporting him mm-hmm. in any way, or that
mm-hmm.
that he is, taking anything from her, mm-hmm. is shameful.
Yeah.
Right. So he can't, and under Sharia law, he can't do that.
Yeah. So it's crazy. So it's like once you start learning a little bit more about the way their culture works, you're like, oh, the fact that she needs to get permission to work makes sense within that framework.
Right.
Within that way of doing things.
Right.
Yes, it actually does make sense because she's not sharing that money with the whole family. Right. He has to continue to pay for everything and she gets to just keep that money.
And so it's weird when you look at when you start to hear more about context. Mm-hmm. This is so weird that feminists always want, oh yeah, well it's got to be contextualized. You've got to look at that in context. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, maybe we should.
Yeah.
Maybe we should look at things in context.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Maybe our history wasn't just one-sided oppression since the beginning of the agrarian age. Mm-hmm. Maybe there were counterbalancing rights and privileges on both sides of the gender divide.
I wonder if it was the same way at some point in our history where obviously we know that it was the man's responsibility to take care of his wife and children. Mm-hmm. Now, I wonder if it was the same way. If she wanted to get a job, was that just all her money? And if he, needed to use any of that money to help take care of the family, was that
I'm
considered shameful?
I'm sure it's different from place to place, but I'm almost positive it was, shameful for a man to use his wife's money. I mean, that just sounds, to me, that sounds obvious.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have any statistics or any, I don't know.
Yeah.
But, I can still feel that.
Right.
In present experience. So I'm almost positive that that's the case.
We've always pooled our money in that.
I know.
But do you have, an innate sense of guilt about that or something? Or,
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's pretty much just it's the way that, I mean, if what it means to be a man is to protect and provide, and then I need to borrow your money to do something, right? Or I need you to be making money in order for us to do something, right? I need to be pooling our resources, which means I'm relying on you to bring in money. There's a sense of shame involved with that, because it means that if what it means to be a man is to provide and protect, I'm not doing my job. That's just fundamental, obvious to me, as far as whether or not that used to be the way it was. I think it's a lot less that way now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But there's still some of that.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's
there's
still
still
there.
This kind of sense of
There's still a stigma. It's even, Peterson says women pretty much only mate across the economic, whatever you want to call
status
hierarchy, and then up. And men, they don't really care. They'll
Right.
mate across and down, and it's pretty common actually for them to mate, with a woman who doesn't.
Well, because
make
they
as
don't
much.
really get to make the choice.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Women are the selectors.
Yeah, we're more selectors. Yeah. Although, do you think though that a man who is on the wealthier side probably has more of a choice than a man who's making less?
Sure. Yes.
That does give him some.
Simply, because a high status man has more options, because more women are
vying for that person.
because
right.
there's more women who see him as high status.
Right.
So,
yeah.
If you're middle class or you're poor or something like this, and you look around at the world, let's say you're poor, right? There's not a lot of women who are going oh, that guy's pretty good.
Right.
Right? He's just not up there. He's just not over and up. He's down for most people.
Yeah.
That's just, and then if you go all the way to the top, it's the exact opposite. It's he's up as far as everyone's concerned, so everyone is kind of available to him in a way.
I wonder if this will change anytime soon. I mean, so many women are working and, making plenty of their own money these days. You'd think that the desire for a certain type of man, you'd think that what they desire in a man would change if they know that, they can make good money themselves. I don't know.
think so, because I think that a lot of it is based in kind of much deeper than just kind of cultural construction or some sort of psychologically kind of. I don't think it's like that. I think it's rooted in the idea of millions of years of evolutionary history, wherein a woman was saddled with the burden of being less mobile for long periods of time, and then having an extended period of infant and childhood that was it's very long in humans, right? For deer is born and it's walking within a couple minutes, it's ready.
Yeah.
For human children, it's months and months before they're even crawling, and then it's they're basically helpless for years.
Right.
So that extended period of time, it's been that way for got millions of years of evolution that's been kind of adapting to that, and so women have needed to find men who could provide. Right? I think it's an evolutionary instinct to provide to find men who you think are capable of providing for you, and when you have a child.
I don't know. I just know that I never was specifically drawn towards wealthy guys, and I mean, I turned down several fairly wealthy individuals over the years, And most of the guys I dated were, you know, making about what I was making or less, you know?
Yep.
One of my first boyfriends, like, I used to bring him groceries because he was so poor, you know?
Yep.
And, you know, I'd pay for things. If I wanted to go out, I'd pay for both of us to go out and have a drink because he didn't have the money, you know? And I think you and I have kind of gone up and down with our income. Like, sometimes you make a little more, sometimes I, like, make a little more, and we kind of go back and forth. But, yeah, I never was, like, specifically drawn to try to find a man that's wealthy, even though my grandma told us all to, you know? But I don't know. So I guess it's not all people, all women.
Well, I don't know that status is necessarily only described in wealth. I think that wealth is obviously a very powerful signal of status.
Yeah.
But I think there are, and this is one of the things I think is wonderful about, you know, kind of capitalism in general, is this kind of multiplicity of venues for expertise. Right? So you may be interested in someone because they're exceptionally funny, or exceptionally intelligent, or exceptionally wealthy, or exceptionally strong, or exceptionally any number of things. There's all sorts of different ways for people to express their, you know, or all sorts of different avenues for people to achieve status or to climb the ladder. You know what I mean? So it's not that, and a lot of those things, if you really climb them, are associated with wealth, and you get financial reward for them, but they're not the only. Wealth itself isn't the only signifier of status. It's just kind of a good proxy for, well, obviously he's good at something.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think I was always drawn to your intellect, and like, because I felt like you were a very well-rounded individual. Like, you were humorous, you were kind of compassionate, you were very. You know, you like to philosophize, and I felt like you were a pretty intellectual individual. And I think that's what I was drawn to, because I dated other guys in the past that really didn't think much about anything, you know? Like, it was just kind of boring being with them, like, you know, because over time it got boring because you're like, okay, anything else in your brain besides just day-to-day nonsense? And I, you know, and you're pretty... Specifically, you like to think about things.
Yeah.
In fact, more so than about day-to-day life.
Yeah.
You know, but I think that's what I was drawn to. You know, was just, and I felt like that. Yeah, between the two of us, that maybe we could, you know, be good partners because of that.
Yeah.
You know. So, anyways, how long have we been going? Oh yeah, over an hour.
Just over.
We gotta go grocery shopping.
We do have to go grocery shopping. So maybe we should cancel out here. If you're interested in checking out Karen Strawn, I would highly recommend it. I'm going to keep... I mean, I stumbled upon her several years ago, and the video she's got on male disposability, which was just... I think I cried the first time I saw that, because it was so... powerful just to hear someone appreciating men and the history of men and the historical contributions of men, because I mean, for all the talk of how, you know, all of history celebrates dead white men, this kind of stuff, my experience of growing up was that all of my history classes denigrated dead white men.
Yeah.
Like, it was always critical. It was always in a critical lens. It was never like, well, you know, this is George Washington, and, you know, he did, you know, these things, and, you know, he was a great man because he didn't, you know, he could have been king, but he stepped down, you know, and decided to, you know, to sacrifice his own power to, you know, for the glorious, for the glory of this idea of, you know, of a democratic state, of a democratic republic. So he decided not to be king, even though he could have been the king, and people were clamoring for him to be the king. That, you know, like, I know that now.
Yeah.
Right. But I was taught about the fact that he was a slaveholder, and I was taught about the fact that, you know, like all the things that are, you know,
also true. And yes, you know, there's obvious problems in history, but it's like I didn't get the good side first. What I got was, here's, you know, this guy who, you know, he founded our nation, and we have to really pay attention to the way that, you know, all of the founding fathers were white men, and some of them were slaveholders, and even though they wrote this stuff, they didn't really mean it because they had their own slaves, and it was this whole kind of like, you know, this negative kind of slant on, none of which I'm not trying to say like it wasn't true, right? But I didn't hear of, you know, like history exalting dead white men. What I grew up with was all of my classes excoriating and just denigrating the duplicity and the power hungry craven madness of white men throughout history. That's how I experienced learning about the world.
Yeah.
So the idea that we're not getting enough of that story, or that somehow we're not, you know, I think it may have been true at some point, but it's not true anymore.
No.
Certainly not true anymore. And so to hear Karen kind of talk about things in a way that seemed like a sensible counterbalance, at least, to the feminist narrative, was really overwhelming. And so I definitely recommend it if you get a chance to check it out.
Yeah. Did we put a link to it?
I've got a link. I think I've got a link to her channel in the
footnote or whatever.
Yeah, in the description of the video. So, and then we've got a link to this article and a link to the Red Pill movie, which is also something that if you haven't seen, I highly recommend it. Rent it, $3 on YouTube. It's totally worthwhile.
Maybe we'll talk more about that kind of stuff in another video. You know, male disposability and
it's come up a lot again recently. Now that after that Gillette ad that kind of just rocked. I don't want to say it rocked my world, but you know, being on Facebook rocked my world because I've been off Facebook for a while, and then I kind of went back in and saw this and got involved in a rabbit hole for like 2 days of just kind of like nonstop, like, these motherfuckers, I can't believe these people. I got really, you know, kind of worked up about it. But it definitely spun me back into this kind of necessity for men's rights and men's voices for in the culture, in the current cultural climate. So
definitely. Okay, thanks for watching. If you have, comment, subscribe.
Where are we at?
With what?
On Twitter and Facebook.
Oh, just us chatting.
All right, everyone. Take care. We'll talk to you later.